Hello and welcome to part one of 2 tutorials on student registration, in which I'll explain the enrolment process for your students. Students enroll onto Linguavote using an access code. If your institution has recently adopted Linguavote, these access codes will have been released to your administration team and will either be distributed to you for you to hand out to your students or distributed directly to students. The students will need an access code to register with Linguavote. They are unique 10-digit numbers that can only be used to register with once and which expire automatically at the end of the purchase period. It's important that you make a note of your students' access codes and the students that they are allocated to and keep this information safe throughout the academic year. This is because if students forget their passwords, they will need their access code to log in and change their login credentials. We'll look at this in more detail in the next tutorial. When students have their access codes, they are ready to register. To register, they go to www.linguavote.com, select their first language. If the page doesn't automatically render in that language, select register, then follow the instructions to the registration form. Let's have a look at the registration form that students will need to complete. I'm going to show you the English version of this form, but the form is also available in other language versions to make registration easier for your students. First, we ask students to input their first name and last name so they can be identified in the student reports and so Linguavote can greet them personally on their dashboard. Next, we ask them to select their nationality. Then we ask them to select their gender, so Linguavote can filter their poll results and so that comments can be segregated by gender if your institution has requested comment segregation. Next, students enter their 10-digit access code. Students are then asked to create a username. This is the name that will appear by their comments for other students to see. The username must be unique and students cannot change it after they register. Students need to create a password. It doesn't matter what this password is or how long, but obviously the longer it is, the more secure it is, and it should be a password that students can easily remember. Finally, students need to enter an email address. It must be a unique email, not a communal email that other students will enter, and it should be an email address the student has access to. Students should be encouraged to complete all this information in English, but the system recognises other scripts too, so they should still be able to register if they enter the fields in, for example, Arabic, Turkish or Japanese. By clicking on Register, students confirm that they are happy with the terms and conditions, which they can read in their first language by clicking on the link. The terms and conditions lay out what Linguavote will and won't do. For example, they state that Linguavote will report consistent antisocial behaviour or misuse to the student's educational institution, and that Linguavote will not share student email addresses with any third party or use the email addresses to communicate anything that is not connected to their use on the Linguavote site. When students click on Register, they will be directed to their dashboard where they can select a level and unit and start learning. If students registered in their first language, all the learning content pages feature instructions and rubrics in that language. This is how the dashboard looks in the Arabic version. To help you instruct your students on the registration process, we will provide a one-page PDF that you can print out and hand out to your students during registration week. In this tutorial, I explained how the registration process works. In part 2, we'll look at the login process and what happens if a student forgets his or her password.